The Dakota Access Pipeline continues to be a topic of conversation on Capitol Hill.
Earlier this month, the Army Corps of Engineers told a Senate subcommittee they have now delayed the environmental review again, this time till 2025. Political reporter Justin Gick has the latest.
Michael Connor at the Army Corps of Engineers told the members of the committee that they were hoping to have this completed by the end of the year. However, he said it is going to take longer. Senator Kevin Kramer says during the comment period, Secretary Connor received thousands of comments and the Corps is trying to address each of them. He says there are some complicated legal issues that need to be addressed. Kramer says Secretary Connor's goal has always been to have a very robust, durable, and defensible decision at the end that would minimize the chance of lawsuits later.
It's too late to do it fast. It's still important to do it right, but please don't let this be a method for simply slowing the process down. I would say I think there are members of his administration or the Biden administration and other agencies that are throwing up some of the roadblocks and some of the barriers. So he needs to make sure he has an ironclad, defensible, EIS that can stand the test of litigation.
Kramer says what he is watching closely is for any troublemakers that are trying to use the process and the system to simply delay an important piece of infrastructure. He says finishing this and expanding the capacity for the Dakota Access Pipeline will incentivize more investment in the production side of North Dakota. Kramer says lawmakers do want to get this done right, and Secretary Connor remains communicative with the committee and is providing them with updates along the way.